You are listening to the Hero's Journey podcast. I'm Dan Zarzana.
And I'm Jeff Garvin.
Let the journey begin.
Hello, listeners, and welcome to the Hero's Journey podcast, where we discuss your favorite stories through the lens of Joseph Campbell's classic monomyth from his opus, The Hero with a Thousand Faces, and Christopher Vogler's modern adaptation from his book, The Writer's Journey.
Friends, we hope you are somewhere warm and safe, because the night air is brisk and damp. The moon is full, painted a sickly yellow as it peeks from behind clouds blacker than night. A feral howl rips the silence apart. Simultaneously distant, and yet too close for comfort. An icy finger races up your spine as you hear the pounding of running feet. You spin around, only to realize you're hearing the thundering of your own panicking heart as it drums within your chest. You try to force a chuckle of relief, but the only sound to escape your constricting throat is a terrified whimper. Another howl, this one much closer. You try to will your legs to break into a run, but it's already too late. Happy Halloween, everyone. In this episode of the Hero's Journey podcast, we're sinking our teeth into films about werewolves. I stole that line from you, Jeff.
Oh, I love it.
From your poll.
Oh, okay, good.
Speaking of poll, in third place with 21% of the vote is Silver Bullet, written by Stephen King, directed by Daniel Attias. 29% of the vote and second place went to Wes Craven's 2005 film Cursed. And the winner with 50% of the vote is John Landis's An American Werewolf in London.
Dan, your script there, I wanted to hear thriller behind it, and I wanted Vincent Price to be reading your fantastic paragraph. It's awesome.
Did you know that John Landis directed Thriller?
Yes. In fact, that's what I knew him for.
What?
That was the thing that I think of John Landis for. Though mostly known for his comedies, apparently.
Except to you.
Like his comedies, like the Thriller video, Animal House, The Blues Brothers, Three Amigos. I had no idea he directed Three Amigos. And Coming to America, writer-director John Landis began his directorial career in 1973 with a horror comedy called Schlock. He returned to the horror comedy genre in 1981 with the release of An American Werewolf in London. The film was released on August 21, 1981, and opened at number 1 for the week. The film went on to earn $30 million against the $10 million production budget during its theatrical run.
The film stars David Naughton as NYU student David Kessler, his friend Jack Goodman, played by Griffin Dunn. Logan's Run fans, take note. Jenny, is it Agutter?
I looked it up and heard it pronounced 3 different ways by robot voices on YouTube. So I think it's Agutter.
Well, she plays Nurse Alex Price. John Woodvine rounds out the principal cast as Dr. Hirsch. And technically in 2 roles, Frank Oz, who appeared 2 episodes ago in Knives Out,
right,
is in this episode as well as the very unhelpful U.S. Embassy representative, Mr. Collins. But at some point, the Muppets are on TV,
right, with
Miss Piggy, and he voices Miss Piggy.
Double duty.
Yeah.
This film was nominated for a brand new Best Makeup category during the 1982 Academy Awards ceremony. This category was created in response to outrage over the lack of recognition for the previous year's The Elephant Man. The now legendary artist Rick Baker won the prize presented to him by actors Kim Hunter and Vincent Price. More appropriate to genre, perhaps, is the film's 4 nominations for the Academy of Science Fiction, Fantasy, and Horror Films Saturn Awards. Rick Baker won Best Makeup there, too, and the film took home the prize for Best Horror Film. John Landis was nominated for Best Writing, but lost to Lawrence Kasdan for the sci-fi fantasy horror classic Raiders of the Lost Ark?
I'd say sci-fi fantasy. It's an adventure. It's, there's paranormal.
Jenny A was nominated for Best Actress, but lost to Karen Allen, also for sci-fi horror and fantasy film Raiders of the Lost Ark.
I thought it was interesting that the Saturn Awards have different categories for best sci-fi film, best fantasy film, best horror film, but all of the writer, director, performer categories are all lumped together.
Be a long, long ceremony otherwise.
Okay, Jeff, we've stalled long enough. Light a candle, beware the moon, and keep clear of the moors. This is the hero's journey of an American werewolf in London.
Act 1 begins with the ordinary world, the world of common day, where we see our main character in their status quo normal life. So I have quite a bit here in the ordinary world, and
oh no, already?
Like the rest of my analysis, I'm pretty sure it's going to go off the rails rapidly. David Kessler is on a backpacking trip through northern England with his friend Jack. The two of them are uncultured, immature, and totally unprepared for what's about to happen. I'm guessing that's about where you drew it, yeah?
That's correct.
Okay.
That's pretty much the world of common day for them.
I'm going to let you slide into Call to Adventure then.
Why?
Because why go off the rails now when I've already... you do your Call to Adventure, and then I can sort of... Otherwise, we're going to repeat ourselves a bunch, you know? So I'm curious
we're going to repeat Act 2 of This is Spinal Tap.
Right, yes, exactly. There's no use in doing that. So just suffice to say, I go much farther into the film for my ordinary world.
So I do at least continue the world of common day through the two boys being dropped off at a crossroads by a farmer who has ferried them at least this far down the road in a sheep truck. So David and Jack are very appropriately among the sheep. A wolf's favorite food, if you believe the fairy tales. And he points them down the road toward a tiny village called East Proctor. And that was the end of the world of common day for me.
Okay, got it. I see where you're going with this.
So the next segment is the call to adventure. The hero is presented with a challenge which renders them unable to continue living in the comfort of the ordinary world. So the boys take shelter from the cold in a pub called the Slaughtered Lamb that has a very impressive plank outside depicting the severed head of a wolf on a pike or pitchfork.
Yeah.
And Jack very astutely says, "Where's the lamb?"
Yeah. Very subtle, this pub.
So the boys go inside. They think they're going to get a drink and a hot meal. The locals are not welcoming. It's one of those scenes where you walk into a bar and the music stops, the chatter stops, and everybody turns around and stares at you.
It's a record scratch moment.
So for me, the call is when Jack notices a 5-pointed star drawn into the wall of the pub, flanked by 2 lit candles. He suspects that there's some kind of mythical or supernatural meaning to it. And because this movie is what it is, him pointing that out to David and saying, "Hey, I wonder what that is. We should ask the locals about it." That was the call to adventure.
I have the call to adventure as the beginning of the wolf attack.
Oof.
This is a werewolf movie, and the journey here is David's entree into becoming and surviving or not being a werewolf. So in a horror movie, often you've got this inciting incident that propels the rest of the story. And so for me, this is the call to adventure. So I guess what we haven't covered yet in the pub is that they're characters, right? So there's these silent characters they're just staring down the boys. And at one point, the silence sort of breaks up, and one pub goer starts telling this joke, which is an immigration joke that's disturbingly relevant 40 years later. So when he asks about the 5-pointed star, it goes silent again, and one of the guys playing darts in a very great moment misses his dart. He hasn't missed a single shot yet, and this dart goes off the board and sticks in the wall. And it's such a great moment of like almost like a Western movie, you know, where the cowboy walks into the saloon. It was that kind of moment.
Yes.
So the joke teller basically says, go Get out of here. You're not welcome here. Go and God be with you. And the barkeep at this point says, you can't let them go. And I'm sure this is part of your refusal from without or something. The dart thrower says, stay on the road, keep clear of the moors, which we've heard before from the sheep farmer.
Yes.
And the joke teller says, beware of the moon.
What the hell was that all about?
I don't know. Let's go up the road and see if there's an inn or something.
Beware the moon?
Yeah, I know, Jack. Come on, we am freezing.
And then after they leave, we don't follow the heroes, but we stay in the bar, which I thought was an interesting tension-building moment from the writer-director standpoint. Is now we're seeing things that the heroes don't see, all these warnings, and if you can't let them go. Should the world know our business? Then well, it's murder. And the joke teller says, well, then murder it is. It's in God's hands. So we know that their lives are threatened. So for me, the call to adventure is the wolf attack. David and Jack suddenly realize that they have strayed off the road and they're walking on the moors, exactly what they were warned not to do. And suddenly they hear this hideous roar, the call of the wild, the call of the beast itself, the literal call. And they turn and spot. We haven't seen anything yet. They just turn and their eyes are wide and they spot what they say must be a sheepdog or something. Now, when we see this thing for the first time, there is no way it's a sheepdog. So that's some refusal right there, the denial that this thing is what it is. So they turn, they quickly walk away, then start running away. They are refusing to engage with this beast. They're fleeing for their lives.
Refusing to engage with the beast.
Yes. Well, this is still, this is my refusal. So David slips and falls on his back. And Jack says, oh, you really scared me, you S-head. And he goes and he helps David up. And then a wolf leaps out of the darkness and sets upon Jack with his fang-laden jaws. This is the wolf attack. And then I move into refusal, which is confronted with the fear of the unknown. Our hero refuses the call. Sometimes the energy is from within, sometimes from without. David, confronted with the fear of the unknown, a.k.a. the beast from the darkness, turns tail and runs. He flees. And then upon...
leaves Jack alone, yeah.
What a jerk. And then upon hearing Jack's screams, he has a moment of conscience and comes back to help. But it's too late. Jack is dead, dead, dead.
Yeah.
So now David gets attacked. He's brutally slashed across the face and chest. And then the pub goers arrive just in time and shoot the werewolf, who transforms instantly upon death into a pale, skinny man corpse. That's what I had for refusal.
All right, which brings us to the meeting with the mentor. The hero receives counsel on how to operate in the special world. I thought the meeting of the mentor was first the farmer saying, stay on the road, stay off the moors.
Yeah,
and then when the pub patrons kick David and Jack out into the night, they repeat that.
Yes.
Stay on the road, stay off the moors, and like you said, beware the moon.
I agree. I had those moments as bullet points as well. For me, this adventure, it begins when David gets bitten because it's now his journey into the special world of becoming a werewolf. And so throughout the film, his visits from Jack serve as mentorship. Jack is trying to tell him the only way to win this game is to end your life so you don't hurt anyone else or make any more werewolves. So I saw the visits from Jack. I see them as tests, but I also saw them as moments of mentorship. Jack's the one he's on the other side now. He's experienced what it's like to be a victim of a werewolf, and he wants to stop his friend from having that same horror visited upon him and upon others.
Yeah.
Well, that leads us to crossing with the threshold. The hero must pass a special barrier to enter the special world. This crossing represents the hero's commitment to taking on the adventure.
Why don't I state mine first, since I'm behind you?
Good.
For me, the werewolf attack was the crossing of the threshold, because the adventure is being the werewolf. For David, that is the adventure. So when he's attacked by the werewolf, that's what inflicts lycanthropy upon him, thus crossing him into the special world of being a werewolf.
I'll buy that.
Kind of almost the exact same language that you used for why it's your call is why it's my crossing, because the special world of being a werewolf. Yeah, anyway, I keep repeating myself.
I have crossing the threshold as waking up in the hospital. He's now entering the special world of being a werewolf. So in the hospital, he's not quite awake yet. He calls out for Jack. And Nurse Alex Price, played by Jenny A., whose last name we don't want to keep butchering, And she hears this and she reports it to the doctor. And nurse Susan Gallagher comes in. And her, in a moment of pure comedy, she comments, "I think he's a Jew." And Alex says, "Why do you think that?" And she says, "Oh, I've had a look." Meaning she's checked whether he's circumcised or not.
Sure.
And then enter Dr. Hirsch, whose arrogant patriarchal doctor stereotype is out stereotyped only by Alex's sexy nurse stereotype.
Right.
He informs us that Jack is in fact dead and that the police believe they were attacked by a lunatic. So now we're in this special world where we're entering this special world where Jack is dead and David is the survivor. And he says he must have been attacked by a very powerful man. So now we also get this element that the world doesn't believe that David was attacked by a werewolf. They're not seeing the real truth.
Sure.
I love that he uses the word lunatic because, the root of lunatic is luna, which literally means moon. So a lunatic means someone who goes crazy at every phase of the moon. So what Hirsch says is true from a certain point of view. By the way, when I heard certain point of view in Empire Strikes Back for years, I thought he was saying a certain point of view, and I was completely confused. What's a certain point of view? What does that mean? I was probably a teenager when I went, just spontaneously one day, "Oh, you idiot." So
I thought, sorry, you're still going.
Yeah. So David wakes up. So to me, these aren't tests yet. David wakes up. Hirsch shines a flashlight into his eye, and we cut to David dreaming of running through the woods. But it's at Wolf's eye. Actually, we don't know it's David. We see this Wolf's eye view of running through the woods. And then Hirsch says, "Hello, David," and he opens his eyes, and Hirsch tells him Jack's dead. And we get that scene with Frank Oz as Collins telling David, "Your parents have been notified. Everything's in order." Now, Frank Oz sounds like Fozzie in the end of that scene. Calm yourself.
Mr. Kessler, try not to excite yourself.
I've never heard Frank Oz talk where I could connect him to one of his character voices, but in that scene,
right,
I was like, "Oh my God, he sounds like Fozzie." So he informs David, "You've been unconscious for 3 weeks. You've had quite a shock. You'll have some scars." And this is when David says, he says that lunatic must have been a very powerful man. And this is when David says, "It wasn't a lunatic. It was an animal, a wolf." So to me, this is crossing the threshold because it's David accepting that this attack came from a wolf. He's acknowledging that, and he's taking a stance against the beliefs of everyone in this special world that it was just an attack by a lunatic. So that's where I drew the line for crossing of the threshold.
Okay. I see where you're going, but the transition from Northern England to a London hospital is a very clear separation from Act 1 to Act 2.
Yeah,
from a filmmaking perspective. So
I agree. That's why I have him waking up in the hospital. That is the transition. I'm putting what happens after that as that's him crossing. I get what you're saying. I agree that arriving in London that's the threshold. I just included all of that as part of that crossing. It's a dissolve. It's not a cut.
it's a fade 2.
There you go.
All right. Well, folks, that concludes an already contentious Act 1.
So much messier. It's going to get so much messier. Ugh.
I think it's time for us to wander over to the Campbell Cafe for
slaughtered
some side
Campbell
quests. Well, I was going to call it Leho Fuchs.
What?
Where the only dish is beef chow mein. The Warren Zevon song "Werewolves of London."
Wow. Deep cut, everybody. Deep cut. All right, welcome to the slaughtered lamb. What are we calling this? Campbell Cafe.
I don't like the slaughtered Campbell. That's too gruesome.
That's gruesome. Welcome to the Campbell Cafe.
Mm-hmm.
Dan, what have you watched, read, played?
This is the second year of our YouTube channel, No Games for Old Men.
Oh my God.
Where I record video game playthroughs. Last year, I did Dead Space.
That's right.
During Halloween. This year, I'm doing a zombie survival open world game called Days Gone. You play a biker named Deacon St. John This is 2 years after the fall of civilization. Something happened. You know, every zombie game or movie has its own mythology for what happened to cause zombies to happen. We don't know what that is yet this time, but this game is a lot of fun. There are and these are fast zombies. They're not the slow shambling zombies. So they will sprint after you and tackle you off your motorcycle if you get too close.
And there's zombie children in this game.
There are. This is the first time I think I've ever seen zombie children before. Yeah. And generally video games will shy away from putting children in games because they don't want you killing children in a video game.
Yeah.
This game was shocking the first time I saw these child zombies, and you are free to eliminate them with prejudice. I think the game is a lot of fun. It's scary. I have jumped out of my seat a couple of times, or at least it feels like I've jumped out of my seat.
Yeah.
It's just a lot of fun. More so, though, is I think the story, the character, the voice acting. Sam Witwer voices the main character. I think the voice actors for Sarah, the woman who plays Deacon's wife, I think her voice performance is stellar. You've been watching the episodes, and I know you hate zombies, but you still made it through 23 episodes so far. As of this recording. So
I agree with what you said.
It's a testament to the story.
The story is fascinating. The relationships, I think, because it's one thing to have a good story, but the relationships between the characters are complex and exciting.
Deacon has his buddy Boozer, who at the beginning of the game is severely injured, and so much of what sends Deacon out into the dangerous open world is trying to find medicines and things for his friend who's convalescing in their Firewatch tower that they've turned into a post-apocalyptic home.
Yeah, and there's these different factions, these different camps of people who have collected to try and survive, and each camp has its own sort of ethics and its own figurehead. And so it's complicated, and it really shows the worst and the best of human nature. And Deacon is he's a drifter, so he's not attached to any particular camp. But I thought it was a cool game mechanic that you have to earn the trust of the different camps so that you can have access to resources. The flashbacks, almost like Jedi Fallen Order, the flashbacks end up being a way that you get access to new skills or new abilities. And there's all these. It's real, and I love that it's got that open world moment you talked about. It's got almost a Grand Theft Auto feeling to the world and the weapons. It's beautiful. It's beautifully designed. So I'm enjoying watching it. I highly recommend that you guys catch up on that. It's a great thing to put on and unwind.
Yeah, and if you like watching gamers punish themselves, I've never played this game before. This is a blind playthrough, but I did start on hard 2 difficulty, which
you are so good at this game. The number of headshots you've gotten on these zombies is stunning. When you raid those camps and you're just like pow pow pow. It's very exciting to watch. And
it's satisfying when it happens, but it's hilarious when it goes wrong and I just get annihilated.
Well, yeah, or when the hordes catch up with you. That's terrifying.
Oh yeah. Then I wet my pants a little bit.
Yeah.
What about you, Jeff E. Pants?
Well, I've just begun playing Mutant Year Zero, which is the first game you started with a year ago. So I'm really enjoying that. But the big thing is I just finished yesterday the audiobook of Elon Musk, the biography by Walter Isaacson.
Oh.
He's the guy who did the Steve Jobs thing. I think he's the former editor of Time magazine, so big biographer. So I've been fascinated by Elon Musk. I've always said that he's like one emotional trauma away from becoming a Bond villain. Mm-hmm. Because he literally launches stuff into space. He's made electric cars. You know, he now owns one of the most powerful media internet companies on the planet. I found this fascinating because his mission in life is pretty noble. He wants to make humanity an interplanetary species by getting us to Mars, and he wants to solve the renewable energy crisis. Like, that's what he's dedicated his life to. And he's such an a-hole. Like, he's such an abrasive, crazy. And it becomes clear throughout this book that part of his brashness is that he's clearly somewhere on the autism spectrum. And so the way he relates to others, his detachment from empathy, part of it is that. But the other part is his upbringing was so brutal. His father was incredibly violent and abusive. They sent him as a child to this camp called Veld Camp in South Africa, where basically the kids are encouraged to beat each other up and vie for resources. It sounded like Survivor meets Lord of the Flies meets Boy Scouts.
Yeah.
And so he learned very young to be ruthless and to do whatever it takes to get what he wants. The guy works, 20 hours a day. And it's also, he hasn't been diagnosed, but many people think he suffers from bipolar disorder, and that many of his apparently crazy decisions, like buying Twitter, are done in moments of mania. Walter Isaacson describes these surges that he'll do. Like he'll show up at SpaceX at 10 p.m. and there's only 2 people on the launch pad, and he flips out and calls everyone and says, "Get down here now!" And employees have to get on planes and drive across the state because he's laid down the law, and he makes up some crazy deadline, like, I want this rocket ready to launch in 10 days, even though they're not going to launch it and there's no impending mission. And so what's clear is that his irrationality and his preternatural drive have terrible consequences, but they've also pushed his companies along. He also started Neuralink. He's working on robots. It's a great portrait of a genius and the price he pays for that progress and the price everyone around him pays. So it's an extremely compelling and well written. It takes you right up to 2023. But if you're fascinated by Elon Musk and his enterprises, I highly recommend it. It's a brilliant, well written book. Well, Dan, let's continue drinking our coffee. We're not going to finish our coffee. We're just going to sidle back to Studios G&Z and dive into the rest of the trash fire that is this episode.
Act 2 of the hero's journey begins with tests, allies, and enemies, or the road of trials. Having crossed the first threshold, the hero meets allies, makes enemies, and must pass a series of tests to prove their worthiness. Allies for David are his friend and traveling companion, Jack Goodman.
Thanks for the ride, sir. You have lovely sheep.
The sexy British nurse, Alex Price.
I'm torn between feeling very sorry for you and finding you terribly attractive.
Yes.
And I've got Dr. Hirsch, although he may be a shapeshifter, because at first he starts off disbelieving David's account. What do you think about Dr. Hirsch?
I've got Hirsch as an ally because
Yeah.
he always takes David seriously, and his goal is always to get David healthy and safe. Even when he finds out, or even when he believes that David is attacking people, he's not, we have to stop him. It's like, we have to get him in here and take care of him. So I put him as an ally.
Enemies, the werewolf.
Yeah, the wolf inside.
As far as other enemies, I don't know, like the cops, I suppose they're enemies.
I had them down as enemies, but they're not really consequential until the very end of the movie.
Yeah.
And really they only get onto the case because Dr. Hirsch calls them, thinking that they will do the right thing.
Which they kind of do. In terms of mythology?
Yeah, I guess you're right. How did you tag the regulars at the slaughtered lamb? Where did you slate them?
You know what? I didn't even note them.
I had them as shapeshifters because
yes,
they eject the boys into the darkness, but then they come to his rescue.
Although too late.
Yeah, well, too late. They save his life.
Not really.
They don't save Jack, but
yeah.
but they intend to. They intend to stop the wolf before he can hurt them.
Moving on to tests. All right, 2 inspectors from Scotland Yard arrive at the hospital to speak with David. David tells them that the official report from East Proctor is wrong. He was not attacked by a lunatic. He was attacked by an animal. The lead investigator tells David that you've suffered a terrible trauma. We're going to go with the official report and the testimony of 2 witnesses over your account.
Yes.
that was a test because David is, like you mentioned earlier, David is being confronted with people disbelieving the truth of the matter. And this sets up what his struggle is going to be throughout pretty much the rest of the adventure.
This is
trying to convince people.
This is what I have as the first test as well. So we're on some level back on track.
Okay.
I also wanted to point out the comedy of Inspector Villiers and Sergeant McManus. Villiers is a sort of like stern, normal, tough cop, no nonsense. And McManus is a total klutz. So like they meet in Dr. Hirsch's office and Dr. Hirsch is, would you like some tea? And McManus is like, oh yeah, that sounds lovely. And Villiers is like, no, we're not having tea. And then McManus knocks over this set of nesting stainless steel surgical pans, and it just makes a giant racket. And then one by one, he's trying to fit them, nest them back together. It's just this long moment of just pure comedy. But then McManus is also the one who believes David. And he says, well, yeah, the evidence points to David's story. I mean, the animal had the wounds, and it's a better fit for the evidence. And Villiers shuts him down. So it was an interesting play on the good cop, bad cop.
And while not a test, it at least pushes the question forward. We see then a scene of David. And this is a third part. You mentioned the first vision of running through the woods from a first-person perspective. This is now a third-person perspective. The viewer sees David running through the woods, naked, attacking and eating a deer.
Yeah.
We have to wonder, is this a dream, or is he somehow getting out of the hospital at night, or something like that? So that poses a question to the viewer. In the next test, David isn't eating. He says he's not hungry, but Nurse Price needs him to eat so that she can give him his medication. David refuses. Mm-hmm. And so Nurse Price sits on his bed, cuts his chicken for him, and does the little "here comes the airplane into the hangar" thing to like kind of force him to eat. There is a mutual attraction established here. It's very palpable.
She is the least professional nurse ever. She puts the food in his mouth and then pinches his nose shut so he has to eat it.
Swallow, make him swallow it.
What?
Yeah. It's like you do with a puppy. When you give a puppy his pill, you hold his mouth shut.
Very unprofessional and very it's funny, you know, the werewolf concept, you could interpret it as an allegory for adolescence, you know, confronting the man within. And this is such an adolescent fantasy of the sexy nurse who just wants to take care of you and will accept you no matter how crazy or violent you are. And it really, I have to give Jenny A much credit for putting soul and depth into what is otherwise just a two-dimensional sexy nurse character.
Yeah. Landis admitted as much that's exactly his motivation when he was writing this.
Teenage fantasy.
So after this, we have another vision of David running through the forest. This time, he's in the clothes that he was wearing while he was attacked. And he comes upon himself in a hospital bed. Nurse Price is looking over him. And then the David that's in the bed suddenly turns into some kind of weird monster. His skin's all gray, his eyes are yellow, and he opens his mouth and roars at Nurse Price, and he's got these big fangs. And
this was not the shot that got Rick Baker the award, because he looks like it's a bad Halloween costume face.
Yes, exactly. After this, David is speaking with Dr. Hirsch about these nightmares that he's been having. And he asks the doctor why he's so quick to disbelieve David's account of the attack. He asks Dr. Hirsch, did you even see Jack's body? Mm-hmm. And he says, no, he's already been buried. And your wounds had already been dressed and cleaned by the time you got here, so I wasn't able to examine you. And so David is frustrated that Dr. Hirsch isn't believing him.
David, please, the police are satisfied. I'm certain if there were a monster roaming around northern England, we'd have seen it on the telly. Now, you'll be leaving this hospital in 3 or 4 days. Please, remain sane. At least until you're no longer our responsibility.
Yeah. It's a failed test to persuade Hirsch of what really happened.
We have another nightmare. David's just having a nightmare every night.
Yeah.
This time, a squad of Nazi werewolves. I mean, these are Nazi uniform wearing werewolves bust into his home with his family, his mom and dad and his little brother and his little sister. They're all sitting around and like machine gun everybody to death while David watches, and then they slit David's throat. David startles awake And Nurse Price is there. She comforts him, goes to open the window, and when she throws the curtains open, there's another Nazi werewolf behind the curtains, and he stabs Nurse Price to death. And then David wakes up again. There's a nightmare within a nightmare. I think things are getting worse.
Nazi wolfception. A dream within a dream.
This was such a ridiculous sequence. And again, these werewolf masks looked like spirit Halloween masks.
Yeah. You have to wonder, when Rick Baker was doing this makeup, was John Landis like, no, make it sillier. The Nazi werewolves have to be ridiculous. Because it's played for as much comedy as horror. These ridiculous Nazi werewolves, right? I don't know. It's as funny as it is scary. It's so ridiculous.
There's a very strange tonal dichotomy with this film because the violence is so violent.
Yes.
It is so gory and so bloody and so shocking. But then the comedy is goofy and lighthearted and like you would expect from, I don't know, a John Landis comedy. This film straddles the line in a very strange way.
I agree. And honestly, I did not enjoy this film very much, but I loved how he played with comedy and horror. Because you know me, I don't really like horror movies. I've seen very few horror movies that I like. It was hard for me to enjoy this, except for the way he just randomly inserted comedy at some of the most inappropriate moments. I thought that was really genius.
So now we have Jack's first appearance to David. Undead Jack. His throat is torn out. His face is carved
that little
to
flap
shreds.
of skin.
The little flap of skin that waggles like a turkey waddle when he talks.
His makeup is amazing.
This is probably part of what got Rick Baker.
Oh, for sure.
The Oscar for best makeup. Yes. And Jack, here's part of why I think the comedy and horror work is that his throat is torn out like you would expect. Okay, this is now undead or zombie Jack, so he's gonna talk like this or something like that. But no, he just talks normally.
Can I have a piece of toast?
Jack tells David that he's been cursed by the werewolf, doomed to walk the earth in limbo until the werewolf's curse is lifted. The last remaining werewolf must be destroyed to lift the curse. And he says, it's you, David. You are the last werewolf.
The supernatural, the power of darkness, it's all true. The undead surround me. Have you ever talked to a corpse? It's boring. I'm lonely. Take your life, David. Kill yourself before you kill others.
Now, David has already been having these nightmares, but he responds very reasonably to his dead friend appearing in front of him in the condition that he is.
It's part of the comedy that he treats it like more casually than how you would actually respond if your dead, gory friend showed up in your hospital room.
Right. At some point, he does start to lose his cool, and he presses the call button, and Nurse Price runs in. Jack has disappeared, and David very suddenly plants a kiss on her and then says, I'm a werewolf, and then admits that he's probably just dreaming again. It was I did not care for this moment.
No.
He's panicking, holding the bed. He's going, oh, God, can somebody help me? And then she comes, and he immediately kisses her. Like,
yeah,
it didn't make sense.
It's like, so is he running into her arms for comfort? Was it a manipulation so she'd come in? I mean, we also skipped the part where the night before he said, I don't want to be alone. And she stayed in the nurse stayed in his, and read to him. And I guess here's for socialized medicine, that a qualified nurse is now babysitting you by reading you Samuel Clemens in the middle of the night.
And has no responsibilities anywhere else in the hospital, apparently. That she
love me as a boy, love me as a monster, read to me, mommy. Yeah, I had the same reaction to that moment. It was like, what?
Yeah.
That seems like a rush. Got to fit the love story. And apparently she finds it attractive that he's losing his mind.
She wants to fix him.
Yes, that's right. She wants to take care of him. Mm-hmm.
All right, in what I thought was the final test, the hospital releases David. Because he has nowhere to go, Nurse Price totally, completely, believably invites him to stay with her at her flat. They go home and shtup.
You had the shtupping as part of Road of Trials?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Yeah.
Good. Yeah, it's that was actually a very sexy love scene with the shower, and it's really great. I also thought they go home
It
and
was
they're
really great.
It was a beautiful lovemaking scene in the middle of this otherwise very goofy movie. They took the love scene very seriously, I thought, and he did a great job. So we get a peek into Alex's personality as they go to this market to buy supplies, I guess food. And Alex is like watching the checker ring up her groceries, like watching the cash register.
Yeah.
And he's like, this is expensive. And she's like, yeah, I know. A girl can't barely keep up with inflation. And I thought, okay, so first the joke about immigration and now the inflation talk. Like, this is everything old is new again. It was oddly relevant. And then the other thing that I thought was nice is they're riding the underground home, and David is surrounded by these punks in crazy outfits, one of whom has like a leopard print head, and he's making fun of them and mocking them, but he's the monster. Like, he's the unusual one in this sea of people. So I thought it was really interesting that they put him on the side with the punks and the freaks and her on the side with the regular business people. Okay, so I have one more. I have the second visit from Jack as a test, but let's just move to approach to the inmost cave. The hero reaches the edge of a dangerous place where the object of his quest is hidden. We get a second visit from Jack, and this scene bothered me because we don't learn anything new. It's a repeat of his visit in the hospital. The stakes don't go up. It's just that Jack is more rotten.
Well, there's that. Jack is more rotten. But the stakes are, Jack tells David the full moon is tomorrow.
Yeah.
Imminent danger. That's why I've got this in the approach to the inmost cave.
Okay. Yeah, I'll buy that. It's he does say, I will not be threatened by a walking meatloaf, which is a funny line.
I would do anything. Rest in peace, Meatloaf.
Oh. So then Alex wakes up and comes into the room. I heard voices. It was just me. Then he says, I just saw Jack again. He says, tomorrow I'll turn into a monster. Do you believe me? He describes the Lon Chaney movie, how the werewolf's father kills him, and says, I think a werewolf can only be killed by someone who loves him, which doesn't end up playing out. And then she says the line that cements the ridiculousness of their relations, which is, I'm torn between feeling very sorry for you and finding you terribly attractive. Uh-huh. That's the crux of teenage fantasy.
When he said, I think a werewolf can only be killed by someone who loves him, my first thought was, okay, well, so what about the first one? The one in the moors that the villagers kill.
Yeah.
And I thought back to the man that werewolf turns back into when they kill him. He looks like an older man, maybe in his 50s or 60s, and I thought maybe one of the villagers was that man's son.
Yeah, or he's one of the pub goers or something.
Yeah, maybe they were all friends, so there's a love there for him, and so that's why that worked. And of course, I had forgotten how the end of this movie plays out.
Right.
I knew that Alex was involved, but I forgot how it happens.
Yeah.
So, like you said, it doesn't play out that way. But that was something that I thought, oh, well, maybe that's an interesting theory. But anyhow.
Now Dr. Hirsch visits East Proctor and goes to the slaughtered lamb. And he makes a major gaffe by asking for a Campari soda at this small village pub. But he settles for a Guinness.
A small Guinness he asks for. Even.
Yeah, then a small Guinness.
Guinness.
And she pours him a 12-ounce bottle. I guess maybe there's a 16-ounce tap.
Imperial pints are what they serve.
There you go.
In the country there. So
he settles for a small Guinness, and it's funny, at one point he wipes the foam off his lip, and you really get the idea, and he doesn't finish his beer. It's like he's really trying to fit in here by having a Guinness, but this is not. He's unfamiliar with how does the foam work and what does Guinness why is it this way?
How to Guinness.
Made me want a Guinness. I almost got Guinness for the beverage, but I'm getting ahead of myself. He starts asking about the slaughtered boys, and he says the Kessler boy was talking about werewolves. And of course, no one wants to talk to him about it. And then the dart thrower suddenly gets up and he leaves to go check on the dogs, which led me to believe, is the werewolf attacking dogs too? And would that make were-dogs? And should there be a sequel about the were-dogs in East Proctor? Hirsch leaves, and it's raining, and he's going to his car, but he notices Dart Thrower just standing in the rain watching him. So he approaches and says, hello. Just like... And the dart thrower says, that boy's in danger. It was a mistake to let him leave here. There's something wrong with this place. And he says, it's the one who lived. He's the one in danger, and not just him. Others will be too. It's almost the full moon. He'll change. And then racist joke teller interrupts and says, that's enough. And dart thrower runs off. Now Hirsch knows something's...
I like that you've given them names. You have
dart
nicknames.
thrower and joke teller?
Yeah,
that's how they should have been listed in the credits.
In
dart
the credits.
Thrower, joke teller. Cut back to David. He's alone all day.
Yes.
Alex is off to work, and he kisses her goodbye. These creepy twin girls, a little reminiscent of The Shining, approach him with the dog, and the dog barks at him, and they laugh, and then the cat hisses at him. So everyone's starting to react. These animals sense something about him that's not right. David locks himself out, has to crawl in through the window, and then we see him at the apartment all day, alone, pacing the apartment. There's nothing on TV. He looks at himself in the mirror, and he's snarling and checking his teeth. Bad Moon Rising by CCR is on.
Yep.
He tries to go to bed. He's tossing and turning. He searches the fridge. He's not hungry. He tries to read. And then we cut to Alex with one of her patients, a little boy, Benjamin, who says no. That's all he says is no, no, no. And so she's treating him, and she's tickling him, and the camera jibs up to look out the window, and we reveal the bad moon has, in fact, rise. That's where I cut approach.
That brings us to the ordeal. The hero faces the ultimate test, often risking death to overcome his worst fears, sometimes actually appearing to die. The full moon has risen. David, sitting there in Alex's apartment, looking very normal. Suddenly he screams and rips his shirt off, and he's writhing on the floor as he turns into a werewolf in a 2-minute sequence.
It's incredible.
This is the scene that got Rick Baker his Academy Award.
Yeah.
It is really impressive.
Yeah.
The old Universal Pictures Wolfman movie, they handled transition with crossfades.
Yeah.
And this one, I mean, you see, we're not even cutting from normal David to a different part of David that looks different. He holds his hand up, and we watch as his fingers elongate, and you hear the cracking of the sinew and the bone, and it looks painful.
And I guess it's worth mentioning, this is 20 years before the kind of digital effects that you would use to make this now. These are practical props that they designed with mechanics and little inflating bladders and all sorts of stuff. It's so creative the way they made this. To me, it's even more powerful to watch because it feels real. You don't go, oh, that's digital graphics that are really, really good. It's like you can feel that, and the sound effects of his creaking bones growing. Oh, so good.
After this transformation into a werewolf, David bursts out onto the London streets and begins a killing spree.
Yeah.
I included the sequence of Hirsch telling Nurse Price about his findings in East Proctor, being suspicious of the police report now. While he doesn't believe the werewolf story, he believes David believes it and might harm himself. So we have to go find David. I think this might be part of the reward, actually.
I have the whole murder sequence as part of the ordeal as well.
Yes, his killing spree is definitely part of the ordeal.
I just wanted to point out something from Vogler that convinced me that this was the ordeal. I went back and forth on it. I'm like, the transformation has to be the ordeal in a werewolf movie.
And it is a delayed event.
Yeah.
This happens about 2/3 of the way through the film. So
yeah, it's a classic delayed crisis. But Vogler says there's a section called negative animus. Sometimes in the journey of our lives, we confront negative projections of the anima or animus. This can be a person who attracts us but isn't good for us, or a bitchy or bastardly part of ourselves that suddenly asserts itself, like Mr. Hyde taking over from Dr. Jekyll. Such a confrontation can be a life-threatening ordeal in a relationship or in personal development. An ideal partner can turn into the Boston Strangler, or a loving father can become a killer. This is the transformation of the hero into that Dr. Jekyll, Mr. Hyde situation. Right. After the murder spree of the English couple, the 3 homeless dudes, and the dude in the tube.
The dude in the tube.
The dude in the tube. That brings us to reward. Having faced their worst fear, the hero seizes the object of their quest. This isn't a object-seizing reward, but the day after, David wakes up naked in the wolf exhibit at the zoo. He steals balloons from a kid to cover his junk.
A naked American man stole my balloons. What?
He steals a coat and he's waiting in line for the bus. It's a great sort of like tracking shot of all these shoed feet waiting for the bus, and then we see David's bare feet. He gets back to Alex's apartment and tells Alex he's lost his mind. He woke up in the zoo, and she's like, "Oh, we didn't know where you were," and she's forgiving and accepting and affectionate. It's like, oh my God, that's not at all how you would react if your boyfriend was gone for a night and showed up in women's clothes. So she's laughing at, oh, where'd you get the coat? And kissing him back, and she's amused and receptive. So then Hirsch calls and tells her, bring David to the hospital right away. Mm-hmm. And on the way to the cab, David says,
I don't know why I feel so good. I haven't felt this good in a long time. You know, my body feels great. I feel like an athlete. Let's go back to your place for a quickie. Later. Oh, come on.
This is new perceptions. He found that surviving death granted him new powers or better perceptions, right? He's feeling better about his life. Also, there's a section called distortions. Heroes may be tainted by the death or evil. Bloodshed and murder are powerful forces, and they may intoxicate him. This is interesting because it flips the idea of seeing the journey through Alex's eyes. But I just wanted to read it because it just caught me. Seeing through deception, a hero may be granted new insight or understanding. She may see through a deception. If she's been dealing with a shape-shifting partner, she may see through his disguises and perceive reality for the first time. She does not have that. She has the opportunity to see through a shape-shifting partner. He literally tells her over and over, and she refuses. So that's Alex. That's where I drew End of Reward.
All right, well, that concludes Act 2 then. It is time for us to head down to the pub zone and have a pina colada at Trader Vic's.
What?
That's another line from Werewolves of London.
Oh, man.
I saw a werewolf drinking a pina colada at Trader Vic's, and his hair was perfect.
You love this song. You love Warren Zevon.
Okay. Where are we? The Slaughtered Lamb, or are we at the Vogler Lounge?
We're at the Slaughtered Lounge.
Okay.
The Vogler Lamb.
Where you and I have hopefully collected a couple of themed beverages to fit An American Werewolf in London. Jeffy Pants, what do you have? What is your themed beverage for An American Werewolf in London?
You know,
Motion picture film.
I went back and forth a lot, but at the end I couldn't resist going with a very classic Blue Moon, the fine wit beer with that.
Yep, I have a Blue Moon. I have a Blue Moon as well.
I was like, should I get Wolf Among Weeds? No, Blue Moon is too perfect. Yay!
Oh, that would have been a good one.
When's the last time we were in sync on beverage? It's been years, right?
Uh-huh.
Wow. Are you drinking yours out of the bottle, or have you got it poured into a glass?
No, I've got it in a glass.
See, that's smart. I have a pint glass because I have very little glassware in my house. And this, I don't know if you can see, this pint glass is from the Luxor. My parents don't live in Vegas anymore, but they moved to Vegas in 2001. So this glass is 22 years old.
Wow.
And I just got back from Las Vegas for a show. So I thought, you know what? I'm going to use my Luxor glass before they tear it down. All right.
So Blue Moon, Belgian white wheat ale, brewed with Valencia orange peel and coriander. This is a 5.4% alcohol by volume. I've got a 12-ounce bottle. I don't know what vessel yours is in.
Same.
Blue Moon out of Golden, Colorado. Established 1995. I didn't know Blue Moon was so relatively young.
Yeah, neither did I.
So these are very cloudy.
Yes.
That you cannot see through this. Even if I hold it up to the sunlight a little bit, I mean, I can't see through it, but there's at least enough translucence introduced that I can see the bubbles rising up out of the center of the glass.
It's pretty hazy for sure.
It's like shadow of bubbles. I'm not even sure I'm seeing the bubbles themselves, but
it smells orangey, but I do have a giant slice of Cara Cara orange on my glass.
I do not have a garnish, and I don't smell orange much at all.
I'm gonna drink it.
I'm guessing what I'm smelling is the coriander, because it smells sort of herbal or floral. Now, I will say this. I do not typically care for wheat beers.
Neither do I.
but this one is palatable.
It's refreshing. It's refreshing when it's really cold. And I do taste the citrus a little bit. I don't know what coriander tastes like, but I don't like the weediness, but
that's the part about wheat beers that I generally don't like. I don't care for that bready, super yeasty
it's liquid
taste.
bread.
As far as tasting the citrus, to me it tastes more like not the juice, more of the pith.
Yeah.
It's not really sweet. There's like a hint of citrus, but it's more of a pulpy.
It's like your mom bought you the no sugar, extra pulp orange juice by mistake, and you have to drink it.
That's not bad.
They're good on a hot day. I find this beer refreshing. It's a good barbecue beer, but I would never sit down at a pub and order this.
No, I wouldn't either. There's some sediment at the bottom of my bottle. It's almost like a syrup. It's really thick. Wonder what that is.
That's not a good sign.
All right, well, we both picked the same thing. How appropriate. And there are like at least 2 iterations of the song Blue Moon in this movie.
I have a very weird connection with the bridge of this song. Anytime I hear Blue Moon and it gets stuck in my head, when my internal replay gets to the bridge, halfway through the bridge, it shifts to the end of the chorus of Saving All My Love for You by Whitney Houston. And I have no explanation for why.
Okay, let's go back to the studio and continue Act
Saving all my love
3
for you.
Act 3 of the hero's journey begins with the road back. The hero is pursued by vengeful forces disturbed when he sees the object of his quest, although in this film, becoming a werewolf was not an object of his quest, but it is the consequence of Act 1.
Although, I think, in a sense, if this is a coming-of-age maturity story, he has sort of sealed the deal with Alex. And a lot of times in horror films, if you have sex, that's why then the killer pursues you because you've sinned. So maybe there's some connection there, or is this like my connection between Blue Moon and Saving All My Love for You by Whitney Houston? Weak and unintentional.
It definitely is what the film Scream spoofs.
Yeah.
That's a great movie, by the way.
Oh, I love it.
Okay, so Alex and David are in the cab on the way to the hospital, responding to the summons by Dr. Hirsch. And the cab driver tells them about the 6 murders last night.
6 of them, all in different parts of the city, all mutilated. He must be a real right maniac, this fella.
This freaks out David. He jumps out of the cab, wants to turn himself into the police. He runs up to a cop to try to get him to arrest him, and he starts insulting the cop, saying that Queen Elizabeth is a man, Prince Charles is a homosexual, although he uses much harsher language. And the cop's not having it. He's like, just get out of here. Quit causing a disturbance. So David confesses his love to Alex, but then, because he knows he's dangerous, runs away. And he escapes Alex. She's not able to catch up to him. Cut to Hirsch and Alex at the hospital meeting with the 2 Scotland Yard inspectors that we met earlier. Mm-hmm. And Hirsch insists that the inspectors must locate David before nightfall. And of course, the inspector, one of them, the older one, doesn't believe that there's a connection between David and the 6 murders, but they do promise to look for him. And this is when the younger one comes back in and he says, I believe.
Yeah. But the inspector admits that forensics says that there was an animal involved.
Now we're back with David. He hops into a phone booth and he tries to call home. His little sister answers the phone, tells them that his parents aren't home. So David says, tell mom and dad that I love them and don't fight with your brother. And then he hangs up and he takes a pocket knife.
A Swiss Army knife.
And he's trying to bring himself to slit his wrist open, but he can't quite do it. So he gives up, exits the phone booth, and then looks across the square and sees Zombie Jack across the street, beckoning him into a theater. Nobody else seems to notice him, or seeing people dressed up in weird costumes is commonplace at Piccadilly Circus, or is Jack only visible to David?
Well, he does disappear rather quickly when other people enter the room, so something supernatural other than him being undead.
So David follows him into the theater, which in the script it was originally going to be cartoons, but when Landis got to Piccadilly Circus, all the theaters in that area had been converted to porn theaters.
Oops.
So he had to rewrite the script to have it be an adult film on screen.
To great comedic effect for the rest of the movie is just there's porn going on in the background
while they're having this awful conversation.
Yeah.
So David buys a ticket and he goes in and he sits down next to Jack, who introduces David to the undead versions of the 6 people that he murdered last night.
Yeah.
The young couple that he murders first, they're all super friendly.
Yeah.
He's like, here's these 2. And the woman's like, hello.
Yeah. She's delighted to be dead.
Now, of course, the 3 homeless guys, they're not quite so happy to have been slaughtered the previous evening. But anyhow, they all impress upon David the need for him to die, to sever the wolf's bloodline and free them from this limbo. And then they all suggest various ways for him to off himself. Oh, you could drown yourself.
A gun?
You could drown yourself. Yeah, all kinds of different ways.
Electric shock? It was very Monty Python.
All of this to the sound of an adult film going on in the background. You're hearing the woman moaning and groaning. And
when he first sits down, they're both like glued to the screen. Like they're not sitting facing each other. They're clearly both watching. And at this point, Jack, his face is gone and he's just 2 eyeballs and a little bit of meat. And I just thought it was really impressive that even with no lips left, he was able to say the word schmuck. It is not easy. This brings us to resurrection. The hero faces death one more time in an ordeal battle or showdown. We get one final transformation. So he's all of a sudden starts writhing and sweating and moaning and screaming. And of course, he's in a porno theater. So like...
everyone thinks he's just really enjoying the movie.
and someone comes up and is standing, I think it's the usher, is standing over him, presumably to ask him to stop orgasming in the theater. And then the wolf gets him. He turns into the wolf, gets him.
He says, please, run, get away, save yourself.
But the guy doesn't run. So then the ticket taker is outside screaming to the police about a mad dog. None of these people have ever seen a dog or know what a dog looks like because this wolf does not resemble a dog. It's a snarling monster.
I get what you're saying, but remember, and you mentioned this before too, that when Jack and David see the werewolf on the moors, that they say, oh, it must be a sheepdog. But it's the middle of the night, and all they're seeing is by moon glow, and the creature is circling them just at the rim of the light. So they're not seeing it very clearly. So the first thing you wouldn't think is, oh, it must be a werewolf or something like that. You would come up with...
After hearing howls and screams, dogs don't, they're in denial. But I will say...
They don't know what English sheepdogs sound like when they howl.
It reminded me of the scene from Ghostbusters where his girlfriend, it smells like burnt dog. Oh, yeah. I'm sorry, Venkman. So they try to lock him in the theater, but the wolf bursts through the security door just as Inspector Villiers and Sergeant McManus show up. And Wolf immediately jumps on the inspector and literally bites his head off, and it goes rolling down the hood of the police car. So
it's kind of like a horrific but also funny moment.
Yes, it's like he bit
this is the horror
his
comedy
head off. So chaos ensues. There's just a million car crashes in Piccadilly Circus and
people being run over
and trampled and crushed between cars. David the Wolf is running amok, eating people. So finally, they corner the wolf in a dead-end alley. There's a mob of people that is gathered and tons of cops, but Alex manages to break through the mob of people and the police line and goes to Wolf David. And he's crouching and snarling, and she tries to reason with him.
Please let me help you.
She says, I love you, because she's really, really dumb.
I love you, David.
What? Wolf David has this moment of recognition where he's like, he stops snarling for a minute, his brow sort of relaxes, and then he snarls and leaps, and that's when SWAT shoots him dead. And he immediately transforms back into a man lying there naked and bloody.
Which brings us to the final segment of the hero's journey, the freedom to live or return with the elixir. The hero, having won a precious treasure or reward, now returns to the ordinary world to share the spoils of battle. Now, this is a tragedy, so the hero dies at the end, but as Campbell and Vogler both discuss in the final segment of A Hero's Journey, the heroes who do not survive their ordeal, their story lives on, and their loved ones remember them. So the last shot of the film is of Alex crying over David's dead body. While we don't see the effects of the slaying of David the werewolf, if we are to believe what Jack has been telling David this entire time, now the werewolf's curse has been lifted, meaning Jack and the rest of the undead are now freed from limbo and can rest.
Yes.
That is not quite freedom to live, but conversely perhaps freedom to die.
The ending bothered me because there's so many places you could have gone with it. There's so many little ends you could wrap up, including it's possible that Alex is pregnant with werewolf baby and that this isn't the end. His bloodline hasn't ended. And you could have cut to Jack standing in back of the crowd looking at the werewolf dead, wondering, wait, why am I still here?
That would have been an interesting ending. Yeah.
So, I don't know. I thought
The Fly did that already, so that's why.
Yeah, that's true.
Actually, I think Cronenberg's Fly came out after this, so yeah. Maybe Cronenberg saw American Werewolf in London and had the exact same thought you did, and then when he remade The Fly, he said, I'm gonna go that next step.
I've never seen The Fly, believe it or not.
Save some for the sequel. You haven't?
I've never seen... Dude, horror movies.
Wow.
No, I do not like or enjoy or for the most part care about horror movies. I recognize their significance and I understand their psychological function, and I guess the horrors in my mind is plenty for me. I'm good.
All right, Jeff. The curse is lifted as the sun rises, and the only howls I'm hearing now are the neighbor's Pomeranian.
Oh, God.
Ladies and gentlemen, we hope you enjoyed this episode of the Hero's Journey podcast. Please share us with your friends and family. Like and subscribe. Rate and review on Apple Podcasts. I got an email from Google recently that said they are discontinuing Google Podcasts. It's going to be merged with YouTube Music. And so if you listen to us on Google Podcasts, you will now be listening to us on YouTube Music. So please do continue to follow us there. If you would like to support the podcast, please visit patreon.com/Heroes Journey Podcast and see if one of the tiers available appeals to you.
Thank you, patrons who make this show possible, including our demigod tier patrons, whom we mention in every episode. And if you want Romper Room style, your name mentioned, you can become a demigod too, including all of our other benefits. John Peterson Jr., Scott Sanford, Ricky Garvin.
It sounds like you're listing John Peterson Jr. as a benefit.
He is a benefit.
He is a benefit.
In the same tier as John Peterson Jr.
is a personal friend of mine, and so to me, he is absolutely a benefit.
And he's like OG demigod patron. He's like one of the first demigod patrons. So
he is the first.
Being in a list with John Peterson Jr.
He was the first.
A benefit unto itself. Ricky Garvin, Jeff Scott, Joseph Wilbur, Michelle Calderon, Ami Garvin, Salathiel Jones, Jasmine and Pete Hudson, Mike and...
Don't do it.
Mrs. Zarzana, and Randy Sparks.
By the way, Randy Sparks popped into our Discord.
Oh, finally.
Yesterday, that is available for all patrons, regardless of the tier at which you sign up. And just to say hello, he said this is my biannual check-in, just to say hi everybody. And he's a very busy guy apparently, but he wanted to check in and say hello to everybody. So hello Randy, and hello everybody in the Discord. We're having a great time.
The Discord has been such an interesting little community. It's been a great eye into the people who are into the same kind of stuff we are, and I learned so much.
Special thanks to Taylor Jordan for composing our theme music. Thank you to Jason Dorff for the episode artwork. Links to their portfolios can be found on the About page of heroesjourneypodcast.com. Also, on heroesjourneypodcast.com is probably the easiest way for you to see the artwork that Jason Dorf has created for each of our episodes. If you go to the episodes page, you'll see a gallery of all the great drawings that he has done for us. They're really fun.
The trademark Hero's Journey is used under license from the Joseph Campbell Foundation. Visit www.jcf.org to learn about how the foundation promotes and celebrates the work of Joseph Campbell.
An American Werewolf in London is copyright 1981, American Werewolf, Inc. Thanks again for listening. Until next time,
journey on.
Did you hear that? I heard that.